looking today at what's known commonly as HR. A lot of people call it different things. There's people and performance, there's directors of talent, there's human asset placement, and there's a whole lot of different terms. But essentially, from the people in the room, you all own or manage a business. And whether you've got one employee or 100 employees, the principles of managing those employees are essentially the same. You afford them the same respect, you have the same level of engagement, and they're actually an investment in your business. And as challenging as it can be from time to time to continue to interact with your team, it's really, really important to get it right, because that's how you're going to hold on to that investment without turning it over and having to reinvest. And there's a huge cost in our staff turnover as well. But also, you recruit them with an ideal in mind, and you have that ideal working for you. You need to do whatever you can to hold on to that, because that's where you get your value from your business. And more, and Scott will attest to it as we go through the morning, that landscape's changing. It's getting more and more difficult to get that engagement and that level of commitment and productivity from your team. Natasha works in the space of engagement and getting your team working really, really well. She works with both business owners and your team. And she told me once that if you ever need to have a hard conversation with your team, she's more than happy to come in and help, because she's an objective person, totally objective. She's no emotion invested in your business, but has the talent and skills to help you work through those things. Those exits are hard too.
Exits are really hard, and actually a test of a company and how good a company is how well you exit somebody. So you can actually exit somebody really well, and they can have a really good experience, believe it or not, of what that exit looked like. And actually Walt Disney World is a really good example of how they say no to people and how they exit people, because the experience is so good, and this is what you want it to be, that people actually then go and recommend you to go and work at Disney because they had such a great experience. So we're a small community, and we want people to go out there and say, yes, it potentially wasn't the right role for me, but actually the way that I left the business was done with a lot of respect, a lot of integrity, and I feel really comfortable with the fact that that wasn't right for me.
So if you need to have a chat with Natasha afterwards, then she's more than happy to catch up with you after we have the session this morning. On the front end, Scott is involved in helping you source the right people for your business. In doing that, it's really important that you know what it is you really want. Have a good hard look at your own business, and really be honest about assessing what your culture is, what your expectations are. I think that sometimes you have an ideal or an image of your business that you want to believe that you project, and a lot of the times that's not necessarily the case. So as you move through your day-to-day operations, anyone that comes in that you said, well, this is what we are, and in fact you're something even a little bit different, those people start to become disillusioned. So as an employer and a manager, it's really, really difficult to get that recipe right and find the right fit. So being honest about it, and Scott can attest to that.
You've just done a presentation.
No, you can elaborate on it if you like. But that's where Scott's expertise is. But he also has a lot of insight into what the talent market looks like now. The landscape's changing, and we all talk about Gen X, Gen Y, baby boomers and millennials. And out there at the moment, you've got a huge mix of all of it, but a really strong push coming through with the millennials, which Scott will highlight in there. But just to recap on some of this thing. So what you've got to look at as a business owner or manager is you've got to look at getting the right people. You've got to look at getting them started. How you get them started in your business is really important. It's the opportunity to reinforce what it is you've sold to them when you've looked at recruiting them for that role. How to keep them, that's the engagement piece. And it's not, you can't just employ them and then forget about it and expect that they'll do their job. It's not the way anymore. It used to be when I started work, but it's not anymore, and it's really changed a lot. And then also, to Natasha's point, letting them go. And there's skill and competency that you need to develop in those spaces, regardless of the industry you work in and regardless of the number of people you employ. What we're going to, the learning outcomes from today for you guys, what we're hoping for is that you have some insight into how to attract and retain the ideal, that's the ideal person for your business, why team engagement's relevant, and how to build trust and accountability and performance through engagement. And most of all, really, you have to understand what an employee is looking for. Why do they turn up every day? Mick Donoghue said this to me yesterday. Why do they turn up every day? And what do they want from their job? Because today, it's all about them. It used to be about you, it's not anymore. And I think you agree with that. You said that to me 100%. It's not about you anymore. If you want a really solid core performance in your business, then it's about them.
Good morning, everybody. My name's Scott Butler. I have a company called Butler HR, and I've been in business since 2000. In fact, in in February next year, it'll be 20 years, which is my longest job. So I've been principally focused on recruiting talented staff and executives in the Illawarra, but I've also recruited overseas and Australia-wide. My focus has been, of late, more so on executive level people, professional people, subject matter experts, but in the last few months I've recruited for accounting professionals, and we identified Eden, who's with us today, as an up-and-coming accountant. But a lot has changed since I started in the recruitment industry, and that's principally what I want to speak about today, is the degree of change. I remember when I first started in recruitment, I had a desk, a telephone, and a box of cards, CVs on my desk. We put an ad in the paper. It'd be a small postage stamp ad. We'd get people responding via the post or ringing us up on Monday morning. The world is so different now. You can look for a job on your phone. You can press apply for a job without doing any research whatsoever. You don't even have to have a cover letter. In fact, people like Seek and LinkedIn encourage you to apply automatically. There's a function. So it's a really interesting market that we're in right now. Before I get too far into it, I'm curious as to where you all come from and what you do. I'm just interested in how many owners are here, business owners. That's a fair whack. People in retail, industry, yeah, and commerce, more commercial business services. Okay. Who recruits people? Do you guys? Directly. Okay. Does anybody have any recent recruitment horror stories? No? So you do?
That's not appropriate for me to share.
That's fair enough. What about... Not yet anyway. Let the horror unfold. Yeah.
Most of our bad experiences have really come from us advertising, but also filtering those out based on a set of criteria, and then interviewing, and then not really having the skills to identify what the personality of that person, or understand what their DNA is.
Yeah.
So that's really difficult, because you've only got half hour, an hour, and they turn up and you think, fantastic, you've got this really great gut feel and they're going to be great for your business. Over time, I've learned people can sell themselves in an hour. Give them a month, it starts to diminish, and they can even hold it together for a probationary period. 12 months hits, and you think, why did I ever employ that person? So I think some insight and knowledge into, I mean, you can look on Facebook now, or you can stalk them. We were talking about stalking before. Stalk them on, or do your research.
Background research,
Yeah.
not stalking.
On Facebook and look at their social media. And I know that there's a wave of litigation out there happening about people being discriminated against because of their social media posts. They haven't got a job. So it's a pretty tricky landscape to be in. And we made a decision 6 months ago, or actually 12 months ago, it was with Steve, to hand over to somebody who could help us identify qualities and characteristics and personalities of people we recruited. It's an investment, and you have to look at it as an investment, because it's not a simple fix that's only going to cost you $500 or the cost of a CCAT. There is an investment made in that, but we've had successes from that investment, whereas we didn't get it right.
I didn't, that's not a paid commercial, by the way.
No, but
Thank you.
That's a horror story.
Yeah, that's it, yeah.
We haven't had so many lately.
Okay, so does anyone have any recent experiences in recruitment that they'd like to share? Has it been straightforward? Have they found it tricky?
Yep.
Who said that? Sorry,
Yeah.
you found it tricky?
Yeah. I
In what
think
respect?
sometimes, from a small, medium enterprise, and depending on your location, the pool of people to draw from is probably not what it should be, or not what you want. And also, sometimes there's a level of desperation. I need to fill that position now,
Sure.
Or
What do you do?
in weeks. I've got an engineering firm.
Sure, and what were you looking for at that
I
particular
was looking for a sort of graduate engineer with
Yep.
some experience,
Mm.
which is kind of a bit hard to find. Some of them have none, some of them take it like a duck to the water, others, it's just, and we only had 2 candidates that were even worth talking to, and I picked the better of the 2 and just turned into a disaster.
Well, just so that you know, we recently changed, we reviewed our terms and conditions of business because we wanted to make sure that it reflects exactly what we do and what we, the type of operation that we are, and also what recruitment looks like today. And the shortlist now is 1 person or more. So when you say you had 2 good people to interview, that's pretty good. If they were employable, if they were eligible, that's pretty good. So 20 years ago, you'd just go, no, let's keep looking, because you could, you had time, because you had the power. It's changed now, and that's a little bit what I'm about to talk about. So, employment as consumerism. In the last few years, we've really noticed a remarkable transition to this consumer-driven model. It's immediate, it's agile, it mirrors other areas of industry and commerce. You can recruit, you can apply for a job via your mobile phone. We can have an interview conducted on Skype or on FaceTime, on a phone. There's so many different, I used a box of cards with some numbers, and I remember handwriting. Now, we just, we Skype, we often don't meet. There's a lot of recruitment consultants actually don't meet in person people that they're referring to jobs, which, it's not something that I would do necessarily. I'm a little, maybe I need to change with the times a bit as well in terms of delivery, but there's a lot of things that are happening. So methods, models, methods need to change to accommodate the changing landscape and the job seeker demands. Why? Because if you mishire, it could cost you between 100 and 300% of that person's salary. And there's a whole range of different facts and figures out there that would say it's around about that or even more. And these are direct and indirect costs. Employing people used to be an occasional thing. My father had a job for 30 years. I know there's plenty of my friends have got parents in the steelworks that have, in the coal mines and have been there, and it's multiple generational employment, or it had been. Now it's more frequent, like consumables. Employing people, nearly 33% of new hires look for a new job in the first 6 months. 33%. 23% of new hires turnover in their first anniversary. So it's just an incredibly challenging market. Consumerism has created a type of employment promiscuity. So back in 2000, I was first introduced to Seek. And about 6 months later, I launched a job on Seek, and within 2 days, I found someone who's really, really good, and I put them in a job, and I went, wow, this is so good. Because back in the day, you'd have to wait till Saturday. It'd cost you good money. Then you'd apply within a week, and then you'd wait and receive, at that point, emails as well as letters of application, and it would take a long time. Now, this is the beginning of immediacy. So job seekers can now search 24/7. They have insight and knowledge. They have modest attention spans, which we were talking about before, are willing to keep searching or shopping even when they have a job. So you've got them the job, they've got a great job, and then they get a job alert saying that the great job they have as an engineer, you can get paid $20,000 more if you work over there, or if you do fly and fire, we can double your salary. How do you compete with that? You've got people just waving money in front of virtually in front of your employees. So throw into the mix this whole millennial thing. So we don't like the way millennials work or commit. Sorry, millennials, because you're 18 to 34 apparently. So there's a few here. They're suspicious. They're hyper-stimulated. In the world generally, they're applying for a job, and there comes a Snapchat. There's a Facebook request, everything, it's very mobile or device orientated world, highly distracted. How do we get their attention? People are now, and I was referenced it before, they're encouraged to tick a box on LinkedIn. Has everyone heard of LinkedIn? I imagine most people have heard of LinkedIn. There's the box you can tick that says you're not looking for a job anymore because you've got one, right? Thanks, boss, I've got a job, but I'm open to offers. So that's LinkedIn helping us. And so they'll always show up. They'll always show up, and you'll get a recruiter inbox message as a consequence of that. So anytime, anywhere, at home, on the way to work, you can casually scroll through potential jobs and see if there's anything better out there. So inbox subscriptions, and people don't unsubscribe to things as much as they should. But to Seek and Indeed and other job boards, so every day you're being reminded what the market looks like. You're going shopping every day. Consumerism, it's changing. So we're told that we need, personal brands, employer brand propositions. We need to tell stories. Enter marketing communications people, and consumerism is defined as creating a social, mobile and consumer style experience for employees inside the company and to attract new prospects. So there's a real change in the market in terms of what recruitment and employment looks like. Do you remember the good old days when you'd advertise and you identify a few great people? This is all relevant to your story. You'd hire one, and then you just get on with it. You wouldn't necessarily think, what do the runners-up expect? What sort of feedback? What sort of service do they expect? You can still do that today, of course. You can still go, I found Eden. Everyone else can take a hike. But that's if you don't care about your reputation. In fact, 43% of Australian job seekers who've applied for a job don't get any feedback at all. So I recently had a situation where I was recruiting a CFO for a major human services group in the Illawarra, and they identified a very, very good CFO, and really dropped the ball on the other three people that they met. So they'd only met them once, and that was their principal engagement. They had a brief phone screening, and then they said, come in and meet our executive team of 4, including the CEO. And they identified that this guy was the guy to chase. They chased him very, very earnestly, and they were unsuccessful. His current employer counter-offered in a very aggressive way and shut that door. So they were back to the market, and they came to see me. So they were being frugal the first round. I was recruiting another senior job for them, and they were trying to be frugal with their money. They failed, they came to see me. I said to them, show me the list of people that you met with. They did, and I said, oh, that person there is very good. Why did you overlook that person? They said, oh, we'd definitely be willing to reconsider that person. Anyway, I phoned them up, and they said, I was very disappointed with the email rejection letter that I got. So I'd spent an hour and a half with them, met with the CEO, it was really my only meeting, and then I received an email with some thanks but no thanks type of feedback. Now this organisation plays a very big game when it comes to purpose, values, signature behaviours, and I can go on and on and on. So we had some very, very strong words with the executive about how we might improve things the next time around. Now we turned this person around because we told the story and of what had happened, but you are being monitored like you've never been before. So you treat a person poorly and they'll go and share that information. They've heard these stories about, going into restaurants, bad news travels fast, and it can travel really fast now thanks to social media. So, research, as we've done just recently, has shown that poorly treated people are definitely less likely to return as customers or consumers. They can also tweet, Facebook, and post on Glassdoor. Has anyone heard of Glassdoor? Yeah. So Glassdoor is where you bellyache about your experience with your former employer. You can also find information about salaries and jobs, but you can bellyache. And there are some Illawarra-based companies on Glassdoor. Go and have a look. So, you really do need to step up and be aware that the world is changing. So our expectations of going to the market and looking for people are different now, and we have to be different and approach it differently. So, I wanted to talk to you about recruitment advertising. So, we want to give you some takeaways here. So, how do you find your headline, tell your story? I think some of the issues that you face when you're going out to the market is actually telling your story. Why should I come to work for you? So I would argue, stop writing job descriptions, stop insisting on people being certain things, and start writing advertising copy. Remember I said earlier, we're in a consumer-driven market, so CX, customer experience, candidate experience. We're now selling jobs. Like people sell houses, they sell cars, banks, pasta sauce. Imagine if a real estate agent told a prospective home buyer in their ads all about the purpose of a house. Now, it's for shelter, how you would use a house, what you need to maintain the house, the typical type of person that lives in a house. It'd be crazy, but that's exactly what we do in a job ad. You're an accountant, and an accountant would be doing today accountant things, and you need to be a qualified accountant, and you need to have accountant-type behaviours. It doesn't tell you anything about what this experience is going to be, what our culture's like, whether we're a successful business, whether the companies that we serve, that we work for in this accounting firm, we work with startups, or we work with small, medium enterprise, or what have you. We need to sell the job. We need to explain to people what makes us different. It's not enough anymore to say that we're looking for an engineer and you'll do engineering, because we already know that. So, do we understand in terms of, from that little anecdote in terms of from a real estate perspective, do you understand that that's what most job ads look like? Just to give you an idea, go and if you have 5 minutes, and I know everyone says it just takes 5 minutes to go and do this one little thing, but I would spend 5 minutes and go and have a look at some of the major employers in the Illawarra, like People Care, Wollongong City Council, Area Health Disability Trust, Self 32, University of Wollongong, and go and have a look at their careers pages, and you'll notice they'll have jobs up. And the jobs, when you click through, you'll notice that they look very much like position descriptions. There's no selling of the message, it's just this is what you will do. There's no encouragement to come in, this is what our department's doing right now today, when we could do that and then link it to a job description. it's a real surprise how old-fashioned and how out of step we are with a consumer-driven market. So the example of the accountant rings true. I did an ad to recruit. I think this was for Stephen's job. So, I'll just read it out because rather than putting it up on the site, but on the screen. Traditionally, CAs and CPAs have migrated to commerce, seeking more operational and complete experiences to grow their career. Now you've been there, done that. You're an experienced expert, proven how valuable your commercial insight would be to a young entrepreneur or a once successful SME looking to reinvent. Return to Chartered, share your knowledge, find solutions. That's just the beginning of the ad that we wrote to find Stephen. Hopefully that inspired Stephen to apply. Yeah. So, but it was. We're trying to sell the concept. We wanted to tap into a market which was outside the traditional chartered firm. We wanted to bring someone back into chartered who'd left chartered, who can come in and now share their experiences and help people reinvent and make them successful. And I had hoped that would snare someone as well qualified and experienced as Stephen. He's pretty darn good. So we also profiled the fact that the business was a non-traditional chartered accounting business, working with startups, and we profiled Gary as well. So, partners of accounting professionals have impressive credentials and highly regarded in the profession, like Gary Pinch, who works closely with young entrepreneurs at UAW Business Incubator or Accelerate as a subject matter expert. So that's got nothing to do with what an accountant does. That's about Gary. This is a job ad, remember? So it's not a position description, it's a job ad, it's different. So rather than replicating a job description, why don't we look at why would someone come and work here? Why work here? Why work at this engineering firm as opposed to that engineering firm? I spoke to an accounting firm yesterday, and they just completely struggled with all these questions, all these points that I'm making here. How do we compare to the competition? Who are we, and how healthy are we? What's our purpose? What's interesting or even unique about us? Why would a talented person come and work here? What's in it for them? What are their needs? What are their risks? What's the career or earning potential for them? What does their future look like? There's just no room anymore for, we're looking for an accountant, and ideally you'll be a CPA with this and that, with all these accounting type experiences, and you'll do accounting work. You'll have all the traits of an accountant. How much does it pay? It's private. We're not going to tell you how much it pays. You have to find that out later. And we're so confident that this is enough information for you to make an informed decision, that we'll be beating all these people off with a stick. It just doesn't make any sense. But that's what we're doing. And I could have literally brought a dozen examples of this. So, sorry, do I feel like it feels like I'm whacking you over the head with a big stick. You need to know and understand your EVP. So an EVP is a set of values that you as an employer offer to your employees and use as a magnet to attract new hires. Besides, candidates, EVP can help you engage and retain employees. So you really need to understand what your value proposition is to your current employees, whether it's good enough, whether you're trying hard enough. And then you've got to try and somehow convey that to an outside world. So quite clearly, it's pretty different working now than it was working in the 80s, and that's my next little sub-point. Do you remember that the harder you work, the luckier you get? Is anyone as old as me? My kids have heard that so many times. Older people. It was obvious. Just if you work really hard, if you do more work, you'll do better than everyone else. I use that in my sport as well. It's just what you do. Good job, own a home, take a holiday, you'll get there if you work hard. It was just such an obvious message. Remember when you had to wait 12 months, you had to work for 12 months before you could take a month's annual leave? Now, I've booked a holiday already. I'll work for a couple of weeks and then I'm going to be off for 3. Is that okay? You know. Now there's a blurry line between work and personal life. It's so different. Employees want experience. They want to understand their personal needs. They want employers to understand their personal needs in and outside of work. They want to be treated like individuals. There's so much on the internet now, in HR forums, business forums, about really getting the most out of people, but enabling them to be their best selves and individual, as opposed to just like everybody else, conformist. So well-being, mental health, paternity, maternity, sabbaticals, compressed weeks, individuals, LGBTI, mobility, hot desking, gig economy. There's all these different references. We're competing with that. You as traditional employers, if there's traditional employers out there that don't do part-time work, don't do compressed weeks, don't do this, don't do that, well, you're going to be doing it, whether you like it or not. So, job for life, that's a thing of the past. Longevity may be a sign now of lethargy, mediocrity, as opposed to loyalty or value to organisation. Mobility, employability, gig economy, contracting, guns for hires over Monday to Friday, 9 to 5. We want outcomes. We just want to see work completed. In the 80s, remuneration was deemed as so important, the most important thing to keep employees. However, nowadays, placing potential financial strain on organisations, perks such as flexible work can be utilised to keep employees. Time is becoming more valuable. I mean, how many really good people have you had to let go because, for example, they're mums and they just need to also tend for their kids. Pick them up, drop them off before school, pick them up after. That used to be, well, we can't set any precedents. Organisations now are most definitely enabling that. So it's legislated by Fair Work. So they can request it. If there's hardship and they need to work part-time, they can request it and you must look at it. So flexibility was once a thing of the past, now it's a trend. And it's a trend that's showing that it can increase productivity and engagement. So Ernst & Young, the chartered accounting firm, one of the big four, they have introduced, I think it was earlier this year, all the school holidays off if you care. And so there's obviously a shrinking of your REM, but all the school holidays off, and that's a full-time job at Ernst & Young if you're working in accounting. A Sydney digital agency created a 4-day week by encouraging everyone, and it was only encouragement, it was discretionary, but to take Wednesdays off. Most do. They're making more money and more productive than they've ever been. More engagement. So these aren't sort of pie-in-the-sky things, they're real-life situations. The world is changing, we need to accommodate that change. My last little point, probably
that you need to wrap up. Yeah.
Need to wrap up, okay. I was going to talk to you about some job search and interview hacks for your family and friends because, another legacy. But I would just say that what's really big at the moment is making sure that your LinkedIn is up to date. It tells a very good story about who you are. Telling stories and having really good stories prepared is important. Very quick anecdote, I interviewed a young lady probably about 2 years ago. She was an accounts payable clerk. I was recruiting accounts payable clerk for one of my loyal clients who I enjoy working for. And I had 2 people in front of me, one who worked for an engineering firm, one who worked for a government instrument, and both accounts payable clerks. One had approximately, I'll probably embellish a little here, but let's say $5 million worth of accounts to pay in a week and had $1 million to pay. The other worked in a team of 10, and really if she had a day off that week, it really wouldn't have mattered. Both quite competent at their job, but one was under enormous pressure and had to make crunch decisions and had to understand the business, had to understand that if I don't pay the gas, people will go, won't be able to weld. Welders might go on strike, whatever, but really had to intimately understand the business. So I was able to explain to her that by having a better understanding of how, to be able to tell that story, to be able to say, look, I do accounts payable and this person does accounts payable, but this is my accounts payable environment. Really important to get to nail those stories. And so when you're telling your friends, if tips and hints for applying for jobs, or for being interviewed, I should say, not applying for jobs, it's very much about preparing yourself to be scrutinised and having good stories, and considering the situation that you're in, not just what you do, but the situation you're in, the pressure situation, the commercial situation. So I just leave you with that, and to make sure that that LinkedIn profile is up to date, because there's nothing more certain than employers, when they're looking for you or when you're looking for people, that you'll be going to look at Facebook and LinkedIn and Google. So we've never before been so scrutinised and to use that term, stalked.
I'm Natasha, Osmond-Dreyers. I run a company called Blue Marbles Consulting. Hello, that's me. So I did have a video which has changed to a little Pac-Man. So I do love videos. If you ever come and talk to me or see me speak at other things, you'll know I love a good video. It keeps momentum. So this one was a particularly cute one about cats and dogs. And the reason for that video is that culture eats strategy for breakfast. And if you get your culture right, you don't have your people watching lots of videos of cats or checking Facebook or videos of people falling over, that sort of thing, because they're actually focused on the work that they're doing as opposed to looking at everything else. So I'm here to talk about culture and all things about culture. So when we think about culture of countries, it's actually a lot easier for us to come up with what that culture is, as opposed to when we think about culture within our organisations. So what does culture mean? Essentially, it is what everybody does when the boss isn't looking. And it's how we do things, and it's what we're known for. So Scott did mention purpose and vision and mission, and these are some really important things. And all too often, we need help with those, we need help to craft those, and we need help to know what that looks like for us. But that feeds into our culture. So when we're talking to our employees, it's about how we want them to feel when we come to work, what we want them to be doing when we're not looking, and what we want them to be saying to other people when they are at a barbecue or at the footy or watching their kids swimming up and down lanes, and telling them how excited they are to be working in your organisation. So I wanted to give you a couple of hints and tips and practical things that you can take away when you think about culture and when you think about working with your people. So I'm a big fan and advocate of a process called radical candor. Now, radical candor is a framework that was put together by a lady called Kim Scott. There's a book, there's multiple TED Talks and podcasts if you wanted to have a look at those. And she used to work for Apple and Google and put this framework together. But what I like about this for you in particular is thinking about what your culture is within your organisation and how you guide your team to achieve really great results. Feedback, praise and criticism is really, really important, and all too often we don't give feedback particularly well. We ourselves, when we're giving the feedback, get really nervous. The person that we're giving the feedback to gets really nervous because they think they're about to be fired. And actually, we don't do situation, behaviour, impact, which is a really great framework for giving feedback. So the situation would be when we were in our breakfast this morning situation, I noticed that you looked at your phone a lot, behaviour, and the impact was I didn't think that you were showing everybody else the commitment that you have to our team
And that made me worried because I know that you're actually really committed to us and what we're doing and how we're moving forwards. Impact. So you're giving feedback in the moment, you're giving praise in front of everybody, and you're giving criticism behind closed doors. So we never criticise in front of the rest of the team, we only praise in front of the rest of the team. Team building, we've talked about getting the right people, but often we put the right people in the wrong roles, and it's being able to recognise that really early and say, well, actually, you are the right person for us, but you are in the wrong position. And how are we going to do that, and how are we going to move you into the right position? Or it might be the wrong person in the wrong role. How we motivate people as well. So we talked a little bit about millennials, we talked a little bit about baby boomers, Gen Y, I think there's Gen Z now. And how we motivate people, and that's about understanding what makes our people tick. We don't need to have fancy off-sites, we don't need to go and play golf, we don't need to have a bowling day, we don't need to go and get pissed down at the pub. Just a conversation with your employees will give you a great insight into who they are, what they're feeling, how they're feeling, and doing that regularly and getting feedback from them regularly will actually go a long way to motivating them to wanting to be a part of your team. That personal connection that we have is really important, because you might notice that Jeff has come in the morning and actually isn't Jeff as he normally is. So you know that there's something going on, and you care deeply about Jeff and what's going on for him, so you pull him aside and have a conversation. Jeff feels listened to. Jeff feels like you've got his back, and Jeff feels like he's going to come back in tomorrow and give it a good go, because actually he knows you care deeply about him. And results as well. Caring personally doesn't mean that you have to care and then not get results. It's not wishy-washy, it's not saying that you have to be really structured and you have to not care to get results. I heard a really great story recently about somebody who was being coached, who said, you know, I was being coached and they kept telling me to talk about my feelings and how I was going and what my fear was. And do you know what? Fear drives me. Fear motivates me. I need that fear. If I don't have that fear, I'll lose my edge. But actually, if you work out what the fear is and work out what the passion is, you have more drive, you have more commitment, and you'll get better results. So building trusting relationships in work is sharing more than just your work self. I was talking to Stacey earlier about work-life balance. It doesn't exist. There is only life, and we work in life. And how we do it is up to us. And the fun that we have in work is up to us. So I think maybe 5 years ago, everybody thought that fun in work was working at Google, where they had slides and pool tables and fun stuff to do and bull pits and, you know, had all this great stuff. But actually fun in work is finding your passion and having as much fun doing your job as you have at home and hanging out with your family and with your friends and doing things that you find fun. That should be your work as well. Telling people when their work isn't good enough, so coming back to that feedback, and when it is. So the statistic is you should do 5 praise and 1 criticism. So if you could go away today and work on, even if it's just in a week, with every single employee that you have, if you had 3 elements of praise and 1 element of criticism that you did next week, that's an amazing start. And it gives people that real clarity as to what they're doing right and what they're not quite getting there on, and really helps them to think about how they deliver on it. Works really well with children if you've got children as well. Works really well with partners. Oh darling, isn't that great? You've stuck the dishwasher nicely. Praise. You could wash the plates before they go in though. Criticism. Deliver hard feedback and make the hard calls. It is really important that people get the hard feedback. Not once a year when you do a performance appraisal. I mean, I would be devastated if somebody waited 12 months to tell me that I sucked at something, because I could have worked on it for 12 months. I could have got better. But actually what they've done is they've let me fail. They've let me fail even more because they haven't given me the hard feedback. And hold a high bar for results. Because you care about somebody, because you have a caring organisation, doesn't mean you don't want great results. And actually, if you get your culture right, if you get your direction right, if you get your guidance right, everything else looks after itself. You will get amazing financial results because actually people show up and they want to be a part of your organisation. They want to be there, they want to be working for you, and it's an amazingly inspiring place to be. This is the Radical Candor framework. And again, I said I wanted to give you a few tips to take away with you. So Radical Candor is caring personally and challenging directly. Ruinous empathy, which actually, and I won't go through them all, and we can talk more about this later if you wanted to, but ruinous empathy, which is actually where I think a lot of us, and a lot of my personal experience in my working life across the world actually, is that we tend to have bosses who sit in ruinous empathy more than in radical candor. So what does that look like? That looks like my boss saying, oh, I know Natasha's got a lot on at the moment, and that presentation she gave was okay, wasn't that good, but she's got a lot on, so I'm not going to tell her. It's okay, it's okay. Or it might be that report you put together, I'm going to tell you it was fantastic, you did such a good job, it was really good. I'm just going to rewrite it at the weekend and not tell you. That's ruinous empathy. That's caring a lot about somebody, but it's actually not telling them what they need to hear for them to get better. Every time you sit in ruinous empathy, what you do is you put an extra camel on your back. Not a straw, a camel, because they're heavier. And you're actually saying, I will take on more work for myself. And when we work in small and medium businesses, there's an awful lot that we have to do anyway. If we take more on and we're not prepared to let our people fail, let our people try, what's actually happening is we're the ones that are waking up at 2 o'clock in the morning going, oh my God, I haven't done that, or this needs to happen, or I'm worried about X, Y, Z, because we're actually not trusting the people around us. And we're generally, when we start a small business, we are subject matter experts in what we are doing. We're not a subject matter expert in the other things. And we tend to employ people, or we should be employing people who are experts in the other things. We're building a team around us. And if we don't let them shine and we don't give them guidance, we're never going to be able to take that camel off our back and do what we want to do and guide and move our businesses forwards. I do like the last one over here with the little cartoon or in the corner, and that's, you know, where we are not caring at all personally and we're challenging very directly to somebody. And that's really, really a terrible place to be. But do you know what? It happens. It happens to us all. We come in some days and we are not feeling it. We're not at our best. We're below the line. So we are contracted, we're closed, we're defensive. Stuff happens. We all make mistakes. We don't get it right all the time. And I give you this one because this is a really great tool, again, for working, for being at home, for life in general, is to take some time to work out where you are. Are you above that line or are you below that line? So when you're at work and you're feeling a little bit anxious or you're feeling nervous about something or you might be feeling upset about something, I'd encourage you to take a moment to take a deep breath and in and out and think about where you are. 98% of success comes from actually understanding who you are, where you are in the moment, how you're feeling, what impact you are having on other people. And you do that by taking a breath. So there's loads of research about the hormones and the stress levels and the different chemicals that are in our body that you can actually reduce by taking that deep breath. Did you know emotions only last in the body for 90 seconds? So if you're having a bit of a panic attack, that emotion, unless you're feeding it with more words, if you actually stop and take a breath, and you can do that for 90 seconds, that feeling, that emotion will pass. Where you really want to be is in this space above the line. So you want to be open, you want to be curious, you want to be trusting of other people. And this is where the really great stuff happens. So there's a whole bunch of research that's just come out about EQ and IQ. And IQ, where typically we will make decisions based on our IQ, we will do it based on facts. But actually, statistically now, if we add in EQ, we are 98% more likely to make the better decision by channeling our IQ and our EQ at the same time. And the way to channel our EQ is to be above this line. So it's to take that breath, to be open, to be curious, to be trusting. And I'd love you all to go away today and at some stage have a think about where you are, where you're sitting. Have a conversation with somebody and come away from that conversation and say, okay, so where was I? Was I above the line? Was I open? Was I curious? Did I trust that I would get some information there that I was looking for? Or was I actually really closed and defensive and contracted? And if I was, what was the impact I had on that other person? And this again comes into the culture that we're trying to create for ourselves and for the people that we work with. Because guess what? Once we get into an organisation and once we have a title of boss, we become quite scary. People get a bit scared by us and they look at us and they kind of go, oh, I'm not sure I'm going to say that. Whereas if you were on the soccer pitch together, you'd say what you needed to say, you'd get it out there, you would do it. But because you're in a working environment, people behave and act differently to you. So having that ability to understand where you are and what your impact is on others is really important. That's all I wanted to cover, and that's my contact details if you wanted to talk to me. As Debbie said before, I'm really happy to chat to anybody if you have any issues as well about culture, about purpose, about vision, onboarding. We can work together, and also letting people go as well. Do give me a shout. Thank you.